Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of The Owner's Box After Dark. Although it's not dark here within the palatial confines of Fulton Pond Studios in Mansfield, Massachusetts. In fact, it's still afternoon here on November 7th, 2024. I'm Mark Farinella, your host. I was the assistant sports editor and whatever else I was at the Sun Chronicle in Attleboro, Massachusetts for well over 40 years, and I'm now a play-by-play sports announcer for a lot of local cable television systems, and I'm still a proud American, and I'm proud to live within a town that voted primarily for Kamala Harris for President of the United States. And that's why I'm here today. I just did an episode the other day in which I told all of you why, among other topics, why I was going to vote for the Vice President of the United States, and proudly do so, which I did, although I'd already done it long before the podcast. I did that actually, back in October. And of course, we all know the outcome. The outcome did not go as I hoped and as many anticipated. And there are a lot of reasons for it, and I'll get into some of them. But I'll just warn you right off the bat. If you're expecting me to come on here and be conciliatory and open my arms to the Make America Great Again crowd and embrace a second administration of Donald J. Trump, then leave. Go away, turn me off, never come back, because you're not going to hear that. I'm angry. I'm pissed off. And I'm heartbroken. More so than I was in 2016, in fact. I think I've come upon the realization that no matter how good and compassionate a candidate can be, that these days all that matters is if you tell the electorate what they want to hear, you'll get elected, no matter how off the rails you are. And that's what happened. A good candidate, maybe not chosen the best way, maybe there were all sorts of flaws in how Kamala Harris became the nominee from the Democratic Party to become President of the United States. You can beat those to death forever, and I know the Democrats are beating them to death right now, and I wish they'd stop, because to be honest, they didn't lose this election. America lost this election. What America has become lost this election. You know, one of my favorite television shows is something you can't see on a regular basis. It's a German TV show. It's called Babylon Berlin. And it's a great kind of, it's detective story, political story, everything all wrapped into one. And I've been watching it for a long time. It was on Netflix for quite a while. And it's a story of a German detective from a small town who moves to Berlin, becomes a member of their police department at the time just before the Weimar Republic fell. And that would be in 1933, where the series has come to this point now. And it shows Berlin as it was, and it's been praised critically by all sorts of critics all over the world as a show that has really captured the sense of what the waning days of that republic were between the two wars. And it was Germany's great flirtation, I guess, with American-style democracy and American-style hedonism as well. And it was it's fascinating. And for the first 3 seasons, they're leading up to, but hardly ever mentioning, the Nazi movement. Season 4, which hasn't been available on Netflix yet, it's already been seen throughout Europe. It's finally been made available to the American audience through a streaming service. I couldn't tell you the name of it again right now if my life depended on it, but it's out there. You can find it. And you can only find the German language version with English subtitles, which, to tell you the truth, I think's better, because I love hearing the actors' real voices. And I don't think the dubs were that great in the first 3 seasons of the series, but I really loved the 4th season. And it does show the encroachment of Nazi ideals into a government that was about to fall and that was about to willingly embrace a socialist revolution. And in this case, a different kind of socialism than what the MAGA types would like you to believe that the Democrats are all about. This is entirely different. This was basically fascism, and and there will be a season 5, I'm told, and hopefully I'll get to see it before I die. Uh, I've had to wait a long time to get to season 4, really, and it's fascinating to see if you're a student of history at all, or even if you're not and just can Google something or read a book once in your life, you can see the parallels between the societies of pre-Nazi Germany and what we're in right now. I mean, we have chosen, I use the term loosely, it's we Americans have chosen to elect a potential dictator, a man who will have no checks and balances, thanks to a Supreme Court decision that basically said that anything he does as president is protected by some sort of immunity, if it's an official act, quote unquote, which is why I really wish Joe Biden would just put him in jail now and official act, and then let it all be sorted out after January. But the Democrats don't do that kind of thing. In the days following this defeat, both Biden and Vice President Harris reached out to Donald Trump, congratulated him on his victory, offered to be helpful in the transition, all the things that Trump did not do when he lost the 2020 election. There will be no insurrection this time around, even if there should be. There will not be one, because Democrats don't do that. I'm very disappointed in this outcome. There's no question about it. Yeah, I'm a liberal, and I'm proud of it. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a liberal, and he gave you Social Security and public education and all those steps down the road that help people in need. But now liberal is a dirty word. I'm not even a Democrat. I'm not a registered Democrat. I'm a registered unenrolled here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I basically lean Democrat most of the time. And as I said in the last podcast, I have voted for Republican candidates in the past when I felt they were moderate and certainly not beholden to Donald Trump or his minions. But right now, I can't bring myself to even think of voting for a Republican. Hell, I worked with one in this last football season. I called some games with a different announcer, and he is actually a state representative from Massachusetts. He is one of the lone Republicans in the state legislature. We didn't get into any discussions. In fact, I think we consciously avoided them because I think everybody knows where my leanings are. He's a nice guy. I have no problems with him at all. But I didn't want to talk politics, and I didn't want that to get into the telecast either, and I'm sure they would not have anyway. So, I mean, I can deal with anybody as long as you're civil and as long as you understand that there's more to it than just worshiping at the altar of an orange god. I think they call those false idols, don't they? Mm-hmm. I'm disappointed because on the issues that I felt the most strongly about, and that I thought that where Vice President Harris would get the most support, she was undercut, and oftentimes by her own gender. Now, I'm not going to blame this whole thing on women. No, I'm not. That would be misogynist of me, and that would be absolving my type of person, white, old men, of their blame in all this, and there's plenty of it. And I think misogyny still plays a huge role in why a person like Kamala Harris or like Hillary Clinton could not get elected president of this country. But you see some of the numbers out there, and you see where on the issue of abortion, reproductive rights, and health care, that 52% of white women without college educations voted against the Democratic ticket. Kamala Harris was out there trying to protect not just the current generation of women, and I would assume, and I don't know that for a fact, but I would assume that many of these women that voted against her probably have no worries about reproductive rights anymore because they're just no longer of the age to do it. But I was thinking about that, she was out there to protect future generations, young girls, people who are being born today that don't have anywhere near as many rights to control their own lives as people who were born in 1971 or earlier, as I was a lot earlier. That was heartbreaking. Also, the numbers for Latino voters. I mean, look, people who are voting in this election have to be American citizens. Now, there may be some abuses somewhere, but all the reports are that it's minuscule at best. But it just seems to me that given the pronouncements un, of future mass deportations by this new Republican administration, yeah, there are a lot of illegal aliens in this country. There certainly are. And many of them work in the farms and fields, doing jobs that white folk don't want to do. Seriously. This is going to hurt the economy. This is going to hurt the economy because, and not only the fact that it's probably unconstitutional, no matter what, although they'll find a way around it, and it's also it's definitely hate-filled, and it's racist. Black men also did not support the Harris ticket, and that's kind of unfortunate. But I think the most unfortunate part is the female vote. A very good female friend of mine told me a long time ago that the worst jealousies in the world are women against other women. Look, I was born during the Eisenhower administration. You remember Dwight David Eisenhower, General of the Armies, World War II. Got a lot more credit probably than he deserved for winning the war, but he got the credit. He did a lot. He was a leader, and he directed the folks pretty well, I would have to say. But his whole philosophy when he became and you might not know this, but when he was being recruited, he was to run for president after his military career and after the war, that both parties wanted him. And he really had no preference. It just at some point, I think it was because, he was born in the Midwest. I think he just felt that the Republican Party spoke more to him. So he became a Republican and he ran. And his goals were to rebuild the world's economy after the war. Remember, he became president less than 8 years after the end of the war, and Europe was in shambles still, and we had been in a war economy and we're having a little bit of trouble transforming that with all the soldiers coming back from overseas and trying to push the women out of the workplace who had done their jobs while they were off fighting. We were having our troubles trying to adapt to a peacetime economy again. And I'd have to say it was pretty effective. I mean, it was the most incredible time of American prosperity and American stature in the world that we not just rebuilt ourselves, but we rebuilt Germany and Japan and Europe and Asia at the same time. It was incredible. But you remember, Eisenhower also warned us about something. He, upon leaving office, gave a speech where he kind of warned us against what he called the military-industrial complex. It was that kind of a meshing of the military and industry during the war that suddenly became very powerful in how it dictated American policy. And he said that that was not a good thing, that there had to be checks and balances, there had to be a separation, and that we would regret it if there wasn't. And I think we didn't pay that very good attention to that. JFK gets elected, young, vibrant, pretty wife. You know, his one of the main things that one of the great goals that he had, and whether they all got sidetracked for one reason or another, was to start ensuring rights to all Americans, civil rights. Now, unfortunately, it also happened during a time of Russian expansionism in the Soviet Union, and Nikita Khrushchev, the premier, was stomping his shoe on the table at the United Nations and saying, "We will bury you." That was more of a German accent, I'm sorry. But, and of course, the Cuban Missile Crisis. And believe me, even though I was 8 years old at the time, I have an extremely vivid memory of the fears of that time. So Kennedy started something. And then, of course, when he was assassinated in Dallas in November 22nd, 1963, Lyndon Johnson became president. Now, Lyndon Johnson was the pragmatic choice to be vice president. He was the Southern Democrat. He represented the wing of the party that was old and white and racist. And yet he had the capability to kind of reach above that while maintaining his connections to that base of power that would get JFK elected. And I'll say one thing about Lyndon Johnson. For all of his faults, he pushed through more civil rights legislation than anybody has. And yeah, the Vietnam War undercut him. And that's why he made that famous announcement that he would not accept the nomination of his party to run for a second full term as president, because he just didn't feel he could govern effectively at that time. And thus, you know, I think the wheels were in motion for huge changes in the country, and that's how Richard Nixon got himself elected. And of course, you remember Richard Nixon, Eisenhower's vice president, ran against Kennedy in 1960. Not a very charismatic guy. Becomes president. He seized upon the real disorderly situation for the Democratic Party, and took the whole idea of being able to end the Vietnam War, which in essence was a surrender. But that's what America was clamoring for, and that was what was destroying Democratic leadership at that time. So Nixon seized upon it. He got our troops out, and and that was that. But of course, as we all know, Nixon was the most paranoid president prior to this next one that we're going to have. And that killed his presidency, his enemies list, all those things that you know about, Watergate. And the sad part is he still was a very effective president when it came down to foreign policy. I mean, he was the one who opened the doors to negotiation with communist China, which was important because there was a new threat growing to the world at that time that nobody knew which way it would go. And for him to be able to make strides there and to bring them into the world community, I think that was a huge accomplishment. I hate to quote a Star Trek movie, but you remember in the scene in the one where Spock says to Kirk, citing an old Vulcan proverb, "Only Nixon could go to China." Well, it's true. Gerald Ford, who took over after Nixon resigned, he was a caretaker. It's about all you can say. Well-meaning, former football player, a little clumsy. Still, he wasn't going to be a long-term president no matter what. And then Jimmy Carter came along. He was very optimistic, very liberal, very compassionate, but he was ineffective, especially with economic issues here at home. And that happened to come upon right about the times of the gas crises and all the threats to whether or not we'd have enough energy to sustain us going into the 21st century, which was still many, many years away. And also the issue in Iran with the hostages, and And the fact that they would negotiate, and finally they decided to release the hostages, but only after Carter lost the election. Jimmy still hanging on to life. He voted for Kamala Harris. I don't know if he knows. I hope I hope his family told him that she won, because he probably doesn't have much longer to live. He's he's probably one of the most compassionate people we've ever had in the office, and I think he proved in his post presidency period of time on this earth that with his charitable endeavors and working with homes for habitats for humanity and things like that, I mean, he proved himself as a good an American as anybody. Seriously. Ronald Reagan, I consider him the first of the great frauds. He was an actor, and he talked a great game. It was always morning in America. And yet, he ignored a few laws here and there. He was a saber rattler. He got us closer to war with Russia than maybe even the missile crisis in '63. We just didn't know it at the time. And then, of course, in his whole second term, he was suffering from Alzheimer's. The one thing that he had going for him, he had a lot of advisors around him that could kind of carry the weight until his term was over. This historical recap's getting a little bit too long, and I know it, so I'll gloss over a little bit of what followed. Two Bushes and a Clinton. No pun intended. Let's underscore that. No pun intended there. But I don't want to ignore what I thought was the most significant presidency of my lifetime. And it's one of the reasons why I feel so terribly conflicted right now, because let's face it, we had 8 years with the first African American president in our history, Barack Hussein Obama, as Donald Trump likes to refer to him. And while he was an inexperienced president at the start, I think he grew into the job. But he was a decent man, a wonderful speaker, had a great family, no crises, no scandals at all. And I'll tell you one thing. If I could have either Barack Obama or his wife Michelle in the White House right now, I'd be all for it. The Constitution prevents President Obama from going back in. And his wife is not interested, even though I think tons of people would vote for her. And I don't blame her. I mean, look, she is a brilliant person, and she's a great speaker. She really relates with a lot of people. She did so much as First Lady to try to promote causes that would uplift people. They had their time in the office. They served, and they deserve their lives now. But boy, do I miss them. And that sort of all brings us, I'm not trying to gloss over Joe Biden. He tried his best. But that brings us up to Trump 2. And I gotta admit, I'm not looking forward to it. In the wake of this 4-year island in which Joe Biden tried his best and did a lot of really good things quietly, too quietly, to make a dent into the bombastic pronouncements of Trump throughout this whole frigging cycle. Now we're going to have the first potential American monarch, because the Supreme Court of the United States has basically said that anything a president does as an official act is immune to prosecution. And the Supreme Court is not going to get any better over the next few years, because even if 2 more justices retired, they're going to be replaced by even more deeply embedded MAGA types that are going to be totally devoted to Donald Trump and his philosophies, if you can call them philosophies. And I'm not even sure that by 2028, it'll still be Donald Trump in charge. Could very well be President J.D. Vance, who was probably plotting behind the scenes to invoke the 25th Amendment on Trump anyway. Let's see what happens there. Anyway, look, I'm going to take a break here. I can put something funny in here to kind of cut the mood a little bit, and then I'll come back and I'll finish this rant, okay? All right. Thanks a lot. We'll be back.
これが金麦のオフ。これがさあ飲むぞって私。なんも考えてませんが、ざっくり言って幸せです。パーッとお風呂。糖質 75% オフだしね。金麦のオフ絶好調。
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to the Owner's Box After Dark. Episode 59. Here on November 7th, 2024. It's another one of those days. It's like 69, 70 degrees out here in Mansfield, Massachusetts, which voted overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris. I love sticking that in the face of a few of my critics from this town who are ultra MAGA. By the way, great bargain. Yes, that's Wendy's. It's a Diet Dr. Pepper Cherry. They can mix all those drinks. I love it. And it's only $1.07 right now, and this is their large. I mean, you can't beat it. Now, they'll hit you like crazy for the hamburger, but Trump's going to fix it. He's going to fix all that. That's what he says anyway. All right. I've vetted most of my angst, but I want to say here that here are the things I still stand for, regardless of who will be the president of the United States over the next 4 years. And hopefully I'll be here for all of them. Because I'm getting to that age where it's not guaranteed anymore. When you have a 7 as the first number, it's a little scary. Now, I'm sure you're saying, well, you don't look it. Either that or well, it's because I look like I'm bald right now because, yeah, I got the haircut and I got the bandage on the top and all that. But, yeah, I mean, yeah, so far so good, but let's put it that way. But anyway, there are things that I still stand for and that I will support no matter what over the next 4 years. The first thing is women's rights. As you know, I've been involved for decades in supporting women's athletics, in promoting women's athletics. My best friends, many of them were women athletes. And they won me over a long time ago because the first thing I did when somebody called me upon the attitude I was taking towards giving them equal coverage in the newspaper or equal respect to male athletes was that, well, how would I feel if I were in their shoes? And I didn't like that feeling. Nobody likes it when somebody tells you you're worthless because my beliefs tell me that you shouldn't be doing this. You should be home. You should be pregnant. You should be having babies, raising these good little Nazi children. Lebensborn. What was it? Lebensborn? Lebensborn. That was what it was called. Now, I believe firmly in equal rights for women, equal pay, equal access to health care, and the ability, far above everything else, to control what happens with their own bodies. There isn't a man on the face of the earth that would openly support vasectomies. How dare you tell me what to do with my penis? No, I can't, especially old white men. We should not be making those decisions for any woman of any age. We can't walk in the shoes, but put yourself in the mindset of thinking, what would I feel? And you see it differently. You see it more clearly. And I think I've done that all my life. And I hope my friends agree with me on that. Yeah, I've had a few slip-ups over the years. I mean, I was a child of the 1950s and 60s. It took some overcoming of male privilege. And you felt that, as a male, you were entitled to certain things. And I see more of this popping up on the internet every day. These incels that come out and say, oh, the big phrase today is your body, my choice. And that's a guy saying that. That would be, in my book, justifiable homicide if a woman decided to say, all right, I'm ending you. Not advocating violence here, but that's fucking stupid. Okay. I am thoroughly in favor of the rights of the LGBTQ community. I am fully in support of transgender rights, especially in athletics. Look, folks, there is no army of young men out there willing to cut their dicks off to become female athletes. It's just not happening. There are some, there are a few, there's always a few of something that makes you raise your eyebrows and say, what the fuck is that all about? But look, again, you don't know, unless you've gone through it, unless you have had a child who's been conflicted since maybe birth or within a couple of years, or maybe there's a physiological reason, or whatever the case may be. You can't judge until you understand why something has happened. And no, people don't go to Mansfield High School, walk in a door, and go in a boy and come out a woman. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen anywhere. I mean, we just redid the gym up here, but they didn't have a surgical unit in there for transgender operations. That is, and to have Trump repeat that over and over and over in his fucking rallies. Good Lord. Is that the level of discourse and intelligence we have in this country now? Yes, it is. And that's why we're in such deep shit. I know gay athletes. I know transgender athletes. And again, I can't walk in their shoes, but I can try to think of what it would be like if I did. What would be the situation? What would I want in my heart? You know what I want? I would want to have the same rights of any other American. Black, white, Latino, gay, straight, confused. Who knows? Who cares? If you're an American, you're supposed to have rights. And people want to deny these people rights. And that is not correct. That is not right. That's not the work of God, if you believe. And I have a hard time believing these days that some of the things that are going on in this country. Okay. I still believe in the politics of hope and inclusion and compassion, and not the politics of fear, hatred, and exclusion. I heard too much of that, the latter, in the Trump rallies. And I thought I was fooled. I thought that the emptying of his arenas and the smaller venues that he was trying to go to, of course, he couldn't pay the people with the big event arenas, so those started to disappear, as opposed to the incredibly enthusiastic crowds that showed up for Kamala Harris's rallies especially towards the end of the campaign. That's why I find it so hard to believe that what the outcome was the outcome. I'm having a hard time grasping it. All right. You probably heard me rustling my papers here. I did have some notes for this one, but the question is now, what did the Democrats do next? 2028, hopefully, we will have a presidential election. I'm sure Donald Trump is going to try, if he's still alive, and there's no guarantees of that, and I'm not saying that there'll be violence. I'm just saying he'll choke on that Big Mac that's finally been waiting out there with his name on it. But whether it's Trump or Vance, whomever, I would like to believe that in 4 more years, yes, we will have a presidential election. There will not be, especially if Trump's still alive, there will not be attempts to overturn presidential succession laws and amendments and to try to give him another term. This is it. He's Grover Cleveland. He had 1 term, lost, and then got another term. The only time it's happened in American politics, and that was Not in the last century either. It was in the previous century, the 19th. I don't know. Do you run Kamala Harris again? What kind of profile will she have over the next 4 years? What kind of voice will she be able to have if that's the case? I mean, I'm not going to get into trying to find a post-mortem here. I mean, yeah, everybody's complaining. Was it picking Walz over Shapiro? Was it as vice president? Was it what was it? What was it? Just the late entry into the campaign that deep sixed her? Was she not specific enough with her details of her policies? I think that there was a much higher standard that she was held to, especially by certain mainstream media outlets that I would have never thought would have done this, like the New York Times or the legacy networks in the U.S. I think they expected more of her than anyone has ever expected of Donald Trump. And that was a tough thing to live up to. I don't know. I would like to think that she has a chance, but, maybe it's just not in the cards. So, who's next? Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. Look, he may be good. I don't know. I don't know him that well. All I know is that Donald Trump has spent the last 8 to 12 years telling the world that the coastal elites are bad. And even though he is a coastal elite, New York silver spoon, lives in Florida, it's all bullshit with him. But, he's managed to convince the great gullible swath in the middle of the country that the coastal elites are bad. So anybody from the West Coast, anybody from the East Coast is almost automatically disqualified now, which is a real shame. But the Democrats have got to learn how to communicate with people they lost a long time ago. Now, remember, Democrats held a stronghold in the South for a long time because they were the racist party. Really, they were the racist party back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, even earlier. That all changed. And yeah, they lost the South because of that. Even if the South has changed a little bit, I mean, obviously the population centers, the big cities vote Democrat. The rural areas don't. And eventually that adds up. And it did in this election, apparently. So I don't know. The Democrats are going to have to look someplace else for their stars. Now, I actually think sometimes, and I've come a little bit farther around on this one, I think that my dream ticket for the next election would be Pete Buttigieg as president and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as vice president. Mayor Pete and AOC. I know what you're thinking. Way too liberal. And you're probably right. That's my suggestion, though. I mean, look, Pete is a great communicator, and he's had the opportunity to serve now in a higher level of government than he'd ever served before. And I think he's proven himself somebody who can express even hard and difficult opinions in a manner that makes you sit and listen to them. But, of course, in much of the nation, homophobia would be off the charts with him. And I don't know if he could even get the votes anywhere except the same states where Kamala Harris won this year. I just don't know. Too many people not willing to give up old notions. And AOC, look, I think she's one of the smartest people in Congress right now. I really do. She's brilliant, and she's one of the hardest workers. But she is a liberal lion, kind of like Teddy Kennedy was, except without the baggage, And maybe she'll someday be in the Senate representing New York, although certainly they're in pretty good shape right now. But there's time. She's young. But I just think that her liberalism would be a red flag for those in what a lot of folks like to call the flyover states. I don't see her picking up a lot of votes again in that same area of the country that was so dedicated to Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump would never have any of those people within 100 feet of him if it was his choice. He's not one of them. He'll tell them anything they want to hear, and they believe, oh, he's one of us. No, he isn't. He hates your guts. You're scum to him. You're just useful idiots that vote him into the office that he wants and will get him the power that he craves. You don't know that. You haven't figured that out. You're idiots. So I don't really know what the Democratic Party will do in the future. Whether it's Trump they're running against or whether it's J.D. Vance. I don't even want to think about that. It's going to be a tough haul to get this taken care of. I still love this country. And I pray that in 4 more years, I'm still here to take up the fight again and try to restore compassion and good faith to the office of the presidency. And with that, just remind you, you'll see, I'm going to move over. I guess I should move over this way. That's right. This is where all the things go. All the addresses here for the podcast. If you want to respond, fine. If you're going to be an asshole, I'm not going to pay any attention to it. I certainly, again, engage you to keep watching the football playoffs. I'll be doing KP football games, I hope, right through to the Super Bowl if they get there. Some of it has to depend on who we can work for at a certain time. I can't explain it all right now, and then I just got my schedule for the winter season, and I think Alex Salaki and I will be doing at least 21 and maybe 22 Mansfield High School basketball games. We'll be doing another 4 or 5 King Philip games. I've got a Bishop Feian game somewhere in the mix there. And I got a lot of hockey games too and all that. And I'll even be doing at least 3 Foxborough girls games during the season. So I'm really looking forward to happier times as we start a new year. And we'll take it from there, okay? Look, thanks for joining me, everybody. This was episode 59. This was one of the darker ones I'll have in a long time. I'll try to perk them up a little bit more in the future. Thank you for joining me. All the best to you. God bless you, and really, God bless the United States of America.